And welcome back inside the VIBELAND studios. I'm Todd Miller. It is episode 13 of VIBELAND Sports. I'm joined by
Kelby Peterson
and
Casady Fletcher.
Guys, how are you?
Oh, I'm good, Todd. I cannot complain. The weather is great, and I am in a great mood, so let's get after it.
Oh, yeah. Got to see some really good artists that VIBELAND was supporting this last weekend. Sleep for Billionaires show down at the Curtain Club in Dallas. It was a ton of fun, and just still riding the wave from that weekend. It was a lot of fun.
If you have not done so, we encourage you to follow us both on Twitter and Instagram at VIBELAND Sports, VIBELAND SPORTS. That's on Twitter and on Instagram. Each week we, of course, have a fan poll question of the week. We'll have some housekeeping duties to tell you a little bit about how you can compete with Kelby, Casady, and myself in the NCAA March Madness bracket. More details to come later here in the show. Speaking of the NCAA tournament, the brackets were released on Sunday. We will dive into our brackets, or at least give you some of our thoughts on how the NCAA set the field up of 68. Coming up in our second segment. Our opening segment today is about the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Thunder have now lost 2 straight games to fall to 14 games over 500. They are a half game behind Portland for 4th in the West, which means a first-round home playoff advantage game. And they are only a game and a half ahead of 8th place Los Angeles. The Clippers have tried to tank this season, but haven't had much success doing it. They're doing very, very well at 41-30. The latest setback, guys, was one that really set in my craw big time on Saturday night. A huge nationally televised game with Golden State in town. You'd already beaten them once on the Warriors' home floor. What do? Electric vibe in the arena, and it's just completely gutted in the first 5 minutes of play as Golden State raced out to a 10-point lead and never looked back, and pounding the Thunder 110-88.
It was really unfortunate to watch that because, Todd, like you said, I was fired up all day. I remember thinking from like Thursday night, people were asking me, hey, what are your plans for this weekend? Well, Saturday night, I'm going to be in front of a TV watching Thunder Golden State. If I can finagle myself into a ticket somehow, I'd love to do that. Didn't get to do that. But, Todd, you were able to go to the game. You said walking into the game, it felt like a playoff atmosphere. You said years ago. Tell me how. Explain that.
What you were talking about the vibe was, it was like the old days when the franchise first moved to Oklahoma City, and there was a lot of anticipation with playoff series, and even more as of late when there was semifinals and Western Conference Finals game at the peak. There was a lot of good vibe outside. Thunder Alley was going. The electricity in the arena was really cool. But you know what? It took Golden State about 5 or 6 minutes to get that electricity sucked out of there with a 17-7 start. And the Thunder, unfortunately, battling for one of the top 4 spots of the Western Conference, which means home court advantage in the first round, laid an egg. They did very little to allow the crowd to even get back into the ball game, and the Warriors cruised 110-88. And what really stunt from my standpoint is the Thunder had a chance to go out and make on a national television a big-time statement with a win over the best team in the NBA. And not only did they fail to use that opportunity to do so, again, they laid an egg, 110-88. And I will guarantee you that of the second half of Golden State, Oklahoma City on Saturday night, there were more people nationally, Kelby, that had tuned out and they were watching the ACC basketball tournament.
Oh, 100%. I had the picture-in-picture on my TV with Zion playing, and in the second half, I'm not going to lie, the bigger screen turned over to Duke because it was just a blowout. And the point I wanted to make about the atmosphere like that is that it seemed like the fans were ready, the town was ready, but the players weren't, which was really disappointing. And even more so, I don't know if I can ever think of a time where I've been more disappointed in a Thunder team than watching that game, because like I've been saying on this podcast throughout this year, this Thunder team feels a little bit different. We're winning games that we're not supposed to. We're down by a lot, and we're making these comebacks. So this is a team that I've never been able to say, hey, we're done. I can't quit on them in the first half. I can't quit on them in the third quarter. But this night, I'll tell you when I quit on them, and it was the moment the rest of the arena did and the rest of the team did too, is when Russell Westbrook got his stupid, idiotic 16th technical foul this year on a really bad foul Yeah, he was mad that he didn't get the layup, but Russell's got to stop doing this where he goes and fouls Klay Thompson hard, in my opinion. And if Klay was, a guy that played with more emotion, I mean, he'd probably try to fight Russell. Like Russell, I get the point was not at Klay, it was at the refs. He was angry, but he basically shoves Klay, chest bumps him really hard, gets a really bad foul, stops the game to argue with the officials. They tee up, and you just see the energy in the arena, the energy on the bench. Everybody, it seemed, in the arena knew, except for Russell Westbrook, that technical not only meant that, hey, they get free throws on the other end, but Russell's gone for the next game. So the Thunder go, hey, we're probably going to lose this game. Now it's looking like we might lose two in a row, which turns out to be 3 in a row, and just continues this slide. And the further we slide, you said we're 2 losses away from outside of the playoffs, not just losing home court advantage, outside of the playoffs. And in a crucial moment like that, in a crucial game like that, that was just one of the most boneheaded decisions I've ever seen. And I hate to see it because it's my guy, it's my Russ, it's my favorite player. And I hate to see it, but it happened, and we're dealing with the ramifications of it.
Yeah, I thought it was just absolutely unacceptable. Look, I'm probably one of the biggest Russell Westbrook apologists that you'll ever meet. I've written multiple articles that have been published about Russell Westbrook and how much I love him and think that he really a lot of times gets the wrong end of criticism. But he deserves 100% of the criticism people are laying on him right now. It is ridiculous knowing that he has 15 technical fouls and knowing what that 16th one means. And Kelby, you reminded me of this a couple of years ago. He was in the exact same scenario, ended up getting one of them rescinded, and didn't end up costing the team. This time, it didn't get rescinded. He's sitting out against the Heat. Again, that game will have already been played when you're hearing this, so we don't know exactly what it looks like. But the fact that he's missing a game in this crucial of a stretch for the Thunder, just there is no defending him, and it's unbelievable what he's done there. And the idiotic foul, not only the fouling 90 feet from the basket after you just didn't get a call, that was bad enough. Then turning around and barking at the official, knowing that he's probably going to tee you up, it's like he was asking for it. It almost looked like he wanted to pick it up.
Yeah, that's what seems ridiculous.
God.
That's what you lose your head for 5 seconds and you cost your team. I mean, he's lost his head a lot this year, and I mean, we've said it on this podcast before. Imagine the things that he said that they didn't hear. He's got to be a better leader in that regard, and it's unfortunate to see. I remember a few years ago when KD was playing here, Russ said, "Hey, I'm done getting texts," and they asked KD about it, and he laughed. He said that was hilarious because I'll believe it when I see it. For a little bit, Russ did calm it down, but then because he made a conscious decision not to argue a few years ago, and then that is long since gone. So I mean, he's got to change. But now, I don't expect it to get any better. It's going to get worse. Now he's at 16. It resets, right? So what's his next tech level, but where he gets suspended?
So get 2 more.
It's every 2.
It's every 2 now.
From here on out.
Okay, so maybe he will calm it down. But yeah, it's ridiculous. It resets in the playoffs, is what I'm thinking. So
yes,
I don't think we're gonna. This is a great opportunity to learn a lesson because, like we said, a few years ago when he did it and it got rescinded, he didn't end up getting suspended. He didn't have a KD at that time. He didn't have a PG at that time. That was the season where we didn't have them and we were trying to make a push. And yeah, it's just unfortunate that a decision was made like that. And again, I hate to criticize the guy. I really do. He's a great basketball player, but a really questionable decision with the technicals and not to along with his questionable decisions of shooting the basketball that night also.
Terrible. 2 of 16. And here's what really bothered me. I sit there and watched him throw up brick after brick after brick 7 times from three-point range. When is enough enough? And guys, whether you want to admit it as Westbrook fans, whether Thunder fans would admit it or not, the guy is in a slight decline with his jump shooting. Mm-hmm. And you know what? Okay, some of those aren't high percentage shots. So you can just say, hey, look, he's not going to make a lot of them. But it's evident to me when you shoot what he's shooting to the free throw line that there is something wrong with his shooting. Yeah. Now, am I saying he's done in 2 years? No. Am I saying he's in a rapid decline? No. He is not the same shooter, and he's never been a great jump shooter that he was last year or 2 years or 5 years ago. And here's another point I want to make. I don't want to put all this at the doorstep of Russell Westbrook. And I'm not the Westbrook fan that you two are. But I'm going to address that in a minute. I think it has to be addressed to the coaching staff.
Yes.
You know what? Everybody says Billy Donovan can't control Russell Westbrook. I say bull.
Yeah.
There are ways to get his attention. You are the head coach. And you know what? If you can't do it, then they need to go find somebody that can. Because I guarantee you there's coaches in the NBA that are coaching that can control Russell Westbrook. But the image is they can't do it. And maybe Donovan really can't. But I don't blame all this on Westbrook. There needs to be some leadership from the sidelines. And I think Billy, by and large, has done a pretty good job this year. But you can't continue to let your star not be a leader. And he's not a leader right now. He's not a guy that you want to follow. My other point on Russell Westbrook is I think Russell Westbrook gets way too much of a pass because he is the quote-unquote savior of the Oklahoma City franchise. And I will agree with that just a little bit because, as we discussed before we came on, if Russell Westbrook elects to leave after Kevin Durant had gutted the franchise and the fan base, if he leaves, the Thunder never again are a player in the Western Conference, in my opinion, and they're Orlando, they're Sacramento, they're Charlotte, they're what Phoenix has been for the last decade, and they're probably not getting better. So I do give the man credit for staying and keeping this franchise afloat, keeping it a viable franchise going forward in the third smallest market in the country. But I cannot live with his actions. And what he did to the media after that 16th technical the other night, I'll just tell you this, grow the hell up, Russell.
Yeah.
Yeah,
grow up.
I did not
You're
like
out doing your job. They're doing their job. Leave them alone.
Yeah, it's unfortunate to see. I don't like that because you don't see, like, I mean, in tougher markets, you don't see LeBron saying next question. And I'm comparing Russell to LeBron. He's the LeBron of our team. I mean, he's the LeBron. He's a top 5 NBA player, top 10 NBA player if you're maybe not from Oklahoma City. But I hate those answers. You got to own up, man up. That's when you say it. I think
you're the leader of the franchise.
The answer next question. Trust me, Russ. The headlines the next day. I know you're trying to avoid headlines. You're going to make them regardless. So you may as well step up and say, "Hey, I screwed up here tonight. I got to be a better example to my team. I'm going to lead." Remember in the beginning of the year, the 0-4 start, he goes, "I got to lead by example. Just watch. Like, don't worry about it. I got this." And by all means, I mean, I'd say he's handled it. We've completely turned around since that 0-4. But here we are again in a bad spot. He's got to step up and be a leader. And those questions weren't tough questions. It was, "Hey, man, do you know that you were at 15 fouls? Hey, what do you think about being suspended for a game?" Now, of course he did. There were 5-year-olds in the arena that knew. I mean, you could see everybody's face behind the bench. You saw the average fan go, immediately go, "Russell," like everybody knew. We've been waiting for that one more technical foul. Everybody in the arena knew that was 16 and that it was a bad deal. So you can't tell me he didn't know, but step up and own it, man.
I think we talked about this, Casady, last week on this podcast about how he unfairly gets some technical fouls. He was mumbling to himself here about 2 weeks ago and got a technical foul. But so you know what? He has built the reputation because I'm sorry he has become a habitual whiner and crier every time something doesn't go his way. And the officials are tired of it. And I'm not defending the NBA officiating because I think it's the worst of any of the major pro sports we have in the United States. It's a joke. And I do think Russell Westbrook doesn't get all the calls that a lot of superstars do. But let it go, man. Go play because they're watching you. They're dialed in on you. And the first time you say anything that has any validity to their ears to ring you up, you're getting that technical foul.
Yeah, they're coming at you. And knowing the way that they officiate you, it's not like this is a new occurrence for Russ. No. It's been happening since he's been in the league. And because of that, yes, you may have to be more cautious. You can't get away with saying the same stuff to an official that Draymond Green can. Guess what? James Harden's going to get more fouls than you too. It just happens. It's the way the NBA is, whether it's right or not. It's the same system that everyone's playing in right now. And nobody else on that Thunder team seems to have a problem of collecting their 15th and 16th technical fouls. That's not an issue for anyone else on the team. Paul George has been as outspoken and as mad at the officials as anybody else in the NBA. Where's his technical foul out? He's not worried, or foul count at. He's not about to be. I guarantee
he's got more than
suspended.
He's had in his career, though, because he's playing alongside Russ and Billy's technical number. I guarantee everybody on this team, their numbers are up because they're around Russ and they see it and it's accepted and nobody's saying anything about it.
Do you guys agree with this statement? This might be a good thing, though. I don't like the timing of it. I think it's a selfish move on Westbrook's part to get that technical with the way this season right now has started to drop south. But maybe he needs to step back, cool the jets, refocus for the last 12 games or so. It's not like we don't have a capable backup in Oklahoma City in Dennis Schroeder.
You're right about that.
You know, in the past years, Casady, you and I have talked about this. Your goose is cooked. There is no such thing as a Dennis Schroeder.
Yeah. Rolling out Dennis Schroeder with a backup of Raymond Felton.
Yeah.
There's worse lineups to roll out tonight against the Heat. And again, I know this episode's going to release after the Heat game. So I hope Russell's at home sitting there tonight. I hope we struggle, and I hope he's sitting there just beating himself up, saying, I could have been there to help my team tonight. And I hope that focus and that attitude tonight changes, and where he comes back to this season and he realizes what he could have been, and he could have been in there for the team, and how every single game matters. This one game could completely change the outlook of not just the season but the playoffs. So it could be huge implications tonight.
I just think we're setting ourselves up for another first-round exit. I really do, and I hate that, because this team should not be in that position. This team, in my opinion, is the second-best team in the Western Conference, but they're not consistent enough. They don't beat the bad teams. They play well against the really good teams.
We got to get on a run. We've been on runs this season. It's been a season of peaks and valleys, and we got to get on a run badly. And I hope, like you said, Todd, this negative thing could propel it forward. I hope it does.
It could jar Russ awake a little, so to speak. I mean, I think everybody on that team needed to be jarred awake on Saturday's game against the Golden State Warriors. It was one of the worst performances I've seen in a game that mattered of that magnitude by this Thunder franchise in years. And I mean that seriously. It was a pitiful performance, awful from start to finish, and they didn't look like they even cared to be out on the court. Again, Russ is your leader. He's the one that sets the tone for that. Maybe this is going to change things up enough where Russ has to sit out, like you're saying, and looks at what's going on, and steps away from the situation. Maybe when he comes back, it's going to be a different Russ. We can only hope so for the playoff push.
This week is our NCAA Tournament preview show. No guest on today's show. Do want to remind you about some exciting things coming up here at VIBELAND Sports. In fact, on Friday of this week, we will have a bonus crossover pod between the Vibel and VIBELAND Sports, featuring KOCO Channel 5 meteorologist Michael Armstrong, one of the really, really good guys in his profession at Oklahoma, one of the more caring people that are on TV as well. He's going to join us, and we're going to do something that we hope to make an annual thing, and that is a severe weather outlook for the upcoming spring, and refresh the preparations for storm season as well, because with the vast growth of Oklahoma City, there's a lot of people here, some that may listen to this podcast, that have never gone through a spring season weather-wise in Oklahoma City. So we want to do that. It's going to be a bonus crossover pod coming up with Channel 5 meteorologist Michael Armstrong. It will drop on Friday of this week, both on the Vibel and VIBELAND Sports. And how about this? We just secured this interview today. Coming up on Friday, April the 12th, it will be a bonus podcast with NASCAR driver, or former NASCAR driver, Kyle Petty, of course, of the legendary Petty Racing family. That's going to be a fun one. It will be a bonus podcast. It will drop on Friday, April the 12th with Kyle Petty, and we hope you will catch that at VIBELAND Sports. Next week, the three of us sit down. We take a look at the upcoming Major League Baseball season as well. It's our first baseball preview show here from VIBELAND Sports. As we promised, this week we talk about the NCAA Tournament bracket, and we'll give you our thoughts after these messages. This is VIBELAND Sports, a presentation of VIBELAND Media.
Hi, we are VIBELAND. We are a creative network fostering and cultivating growth amongst a community of artists and innovators.
Here at HQ, we inspire young entrepreneurs to pursue their ideas and fulfill their highest ambitions. From producing albums to shooting multimedia content to our involvement with various charitable organizations within our local community, we seek to empower and spread knowledge through open source innovation.
We here at VIBELAND look forward to the future and hope you will join us on this exciting journey. Create, innovate, educate. VIBELAND.
And welcome back to our second segment of this week's 13th edition of VIBELAND Sports. Hope you enjoy our podcast, as we like to say around here. If you do, tell someone. If you don't, tell us. And you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at VIBELAND Sports. Before we get to the NCAA tournament thoughts on this week's show, I want to invite you to take part in VIBELAND Sports' first ever bracket challenge. Simply go to ESPN, join the group VIBELAND Sports, VIBELAND, all capital letters, and then sports with a capital S. That's VIBELAND Sports from ESPN. Join the group. It's free to enter. You can test your knowledge against ours, and I'm quite certain we'll probably be towards the bottom. And Casady will be tweeting updates throughout the tournament in terms of the various standings of individuals. And the entries need to get in just as soon as possible. You have until Thursday at 11 a.m. Central Time, Thursday, March 21st, right ahead of the first round game in this year's NCAA tournament. Hope you'll take part. It'll be a lot of fun. It's the first annual VIBELAND Sports Bracket Challenge, again, from VIBELAND Sports and ESPN. All right, guys, let's talk about some interesting first-round matchups. The number one seeds, of course, as announced on Sunday, Duke in the East, Gonzaga in the West, Virginia in the South, North Carolina in the Midwest. And before we actually take a look at first-round matchups, let's give you a little bit of a conference breakdown. The Big Ten led all conferences with 8 selections. The SEC and the Atlantic Coast Conference each with 7, but of those 7 for the ACC, 3 were number one seeds. The Big 12 sent 6 to the Big Dance. The Big East and the American Athletic Conference, 4 apiece. The Pac-12, I think too many, 3. The Atlantic 10, the Mountain West, the West Coast Conference, and the Ohio Valley Conference, each with multiple bids. And then there were a ton of course, conferences with automatic bids that got just their champion of their postseason tournament into the field. What do you guys like in the first round?
My most interesting matchup, I believe, is going to be the Marquette and Murray State.
Bingo.
On the west side, that 5-12 game. I mean, if you take all the players and line them up in the tournament, we've got the top 2 scoring players in the tournament playing each other that day. And by the way, they play the same position. Murray State Racers, you've got Jay Morant with 24.6 points game. And at Marquette, you've got Marcus Howard with put up 25 points a game this year. Both guys can shoot and score. Marcus Howard, he's going to be a guy that's not afraid to shoot over anybody that you see out on the field. And if you guys haven't watched Murray State's Jay Morant this year, a lot of people are predicting him to be the number 2 pick in the draft behind Zion. So that is a NBA prospect right there. So I think that's going to be a high-scoring, really interesting game. I don't know how much further either team makes it past that game, but that first-round matchup, I am super excited for.
I'm going to tell you, in the NCAA tournament, guys, a lot of it is about 2 things, rebounding and guard play. And both of those guys have guards that could go. You're talking about Marcus Howard and Jay Morant. Morant is averaging a double-double, 24 points, 10 rebounds, and 5.5 assists. The guy has just put up mind-boggling numbers for the Murray State Racers this season. I'm with you, man. I like that matchup, but it's one of those that can always go either way when you're talking about what is it, the 6-11?
This is actually the 5-12.
5-12,
so, yeah. But yeah,
those are always
that's you mark it down every year, 1 year. If you don't fill your bracket out and mark down 112 over 5, I don't think you're doing it right.
There's another 5-12 matchup that I'm looking at of the South, and that is the Oregon Ducks, who really came on strong to win the Pacific 10 postseason tournament. They take on 5th seed of Wisconsin. Wisconsin just isn't what the Badgers have been in the past. I think they are ripe for an upset with Dana Altman's Ducks in that first round of the 5-12 matchup.
I think so too. In Oregon, you forget they had a really good recruiting class a couple years ago, so it's time for these guys to perform. That's a really powerful name right there, Wisconsin and Oregon at the 5-12 seed. Again, that's going to be another great game. Wisconsin, they're trying to overcome some free throw shooting woes, so it's exciting to see what they're going to do if they can do that. If the game comes down to free throws at the end, guys, I promise you, Oregon is going to be putting Wisconsin on the line.
Of course, around here, a lot of people are looking at the Oklahoma Sooners, who did manage to get in. They were comfortably in as the number 9 seed despite a losing record in Big 12 conference play. They will play in the 8-9 matchup against the Ole Miss Rebels. Ole Miss is a great story. They have a brand-new coach. They were picked 14th in the SEC, and here they are, the number 8 seed in the South region, taking on Oklahoma. Casady, it's good to see the Sooners back in the dance. I think a lot of people were surprised that they were seated as high as 9th. I thought they would be in 8 or 9 after they'd beaten Kansas. But when they fell to West Virginia in the first round of the Big 12 tournament, I actually had some concerns that they might be in Dayton, Ohio for that play-in round. And I didn't want any part of that for the Sooners.
Oh, heck no. Yeah, if you're a Power 5 school and you have to go to the play-in round, I feel like you probably would be more satisfied just going to the NIT. And look, you still, quote-unquote, made the tournament. You made the field of 68. I feel the same way about the 4 play-in games as I do the 1-game wild card game in the MLB. It's, yes, you might have made the postseason, but you didn't make the playoffs, or you didn't make the actual tournament. You made the postseason, but it's different than the actual 64 teams that are in the bracket, and you don't want to have to mess with that. I think for Oklahoma, look, I'm glad they made it. I don't know if they're going to do much at all, but at least you can say that you made the tournament again. You're a 9 seed. Those guys, there's some young guys on that team that were very, very excited. The video was great that they showed from all the reactions that they had. You can tell that's some of their – it's anybody, any college athlete that plays basketball, it's their lifelong dream to make March Madness. So for that reason, I think I'm happy for the team. But again, they're in a very tough spot. That 8-9 matchup, even if you get out of the first round, you're going to be playing Virginia in the second round, and that's just not a good matchup necessarily for the Sooners.
It's not, but Virginia's not a real high-scoring team either. I mean, that could be a grinded-out half-court defensive-type game because the Cavaliers, have by far and away the best defense going into the field of 68. We talked about the first 4 in Dayton this year. Pair of 16th seeds will play. That is North Carolina Central and North Dakota State. Also, the matchup of 16s in the West, Farley Dickinson against Prairie View. The play-in round in the East bracket, 11th-seeded Belmont, 11th-seeded Temple, and in the West, a pair of 11 seeds, Arizona State and St. John's. Here's another interesting matchup. I want your thoughts on this. It comes for the East bracket. Number 7 seed Louisville, number 10 seed Minnesota. Everybody's going, so what? Well, what it is, the Louisville Cardinals up until this year were coached by Rick Pitino. The Minnesota Golden Gophers now are coached by his son, Richard Pitino. I don't think that they just drew names in a hat and that's just the way it came out. But that's my feeling.
Wonder. Yeah, that's weird. You think Rick's going to be watching that one? Yeah, I don't think he's going to be wearing any of his Louisville red that day.
It's doubtful.
Very doubtful. They didn't really leave on the best of terms, you would say. I've heard rumors that said he hasn't even been back in the state of Kentucky since they fired him.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, I wouldn't blame him, though.
Another interesting matchup, I think, in the first round is in the Midwest. 7th-seeded Wofford. I mean, they are from a small conference and seeded very high for a Wofford team. 7th seed against Seton Hall. Seton Hall, I think, is underseeded at number 10. I think they should have been maybe a 7 or an 8 seed. I mean, they came on strong in the Big East postseason tournament. They beat Marquette in the semifinals and pushed Villanova to the brink in the title game. This is a team in Seton Hall that's played a top 10 schedule, and they have 7 quad one wins, which that's what the NCAA goes by now. That's why OU is 9th, despite having a sub-conference 500 record. So what do you guys think about Wofford and Seton Hall?
I thought Seton Hall really showed me something that I was not expecting in that final. And watching that game, down to the absolute last second, they had a chance to win that thing at the buzzer. And look, if you can compete with the Villanovas of the world and match them offensively, slow them down enough on the defensive end, I think they have as good a chance as anybody as being a bit of a sleeper coming out of there. Now, you're probably going to have to face Kentucky in the second round.
Yeah,
that's tough.
That's I'll be honest, that's why I'm rooting for Wofford. I'm looking ahead. I want Wofford and Kentucky to play because I think that's a game where Kentucky walks in the building and says, we're Kentucky, who's Wofford?
Right.
On the other side, I think the name on the front of the jersey, I've got Wofford. I mean, nobody cares about my bracket, but I do have Wofford upsetting Kentucky just for that. Not for like the basketball analytical research that I've done, but the fact that when I think Kentucky and Wofford meet on the floor, Kentucky looks across and sees the Wofford jersey and laughs to themselves, and Wofford looks across and says, that's Kentucky. We're going to make a March Madness memory right here, right now. This is going to be one of those magical evenings. That's my only reason I want to see that. That's a little bit of March Madness and March Magic Madness.
By the way, I'm brokenhearted. No Ramblers, no Rattlers this year in the field of 68. We're talking about Baltimore County, Maryland-Baltimore County, who upset Virginia last year, the number 1 seed. And then no Loyola of Chicago.
Yeah.
No Sister Jean this year.
No Sister Jean.
She's headed to the NIT.
Yeah.
I'll probably watch the NIT and follow her.
There you go.
I want to ask the listeners here. Remember last year, a 16 seed beat a 1 seed. Todd did just say it, but before he said that, I asked a couple of people in my office today, and they couldn't remember who the 1 seed was that lost last year. It was Virginia, but ask yourself that before. And did you remember off the top of your head? Because, it was such a big deal, but look, a year later, and I asked a few people today, and they couldn't remember.
I did remember. I couldn't remember who the team that beat them.
Exactly,
to be honest.
yeah.
I just rememred that it was Virginia that went down because I was so excited that a 16
That it
seed
finally
beat a
yeah.
1. I remember watching pretty much every second of that second half when it was just back and forth, and Virginia, you started to realize it with about 8 minutes to go, like, oh gosh, I don't think they're going to be able to do this.
Yeah.
And it was fun to watch.
It was the one time in the tournament challenges, you don't even have to announce it to everybody. Your bracket's busted.
Right.
Nobody had that. And that, by the way, guys, this just in, if you're listening to this at Thursday the first game's at 11. If you're listening to this at Thursday at 2 o'clock, yeah, guess what? All of our brackets already busted. Don't worry.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, there were people I knew that was just shocked. I'm like, bracket's gone. I mean, Virginia. I said, do you understand how many people had Virginia going to the Final Four or maybe even winning it?
Yep.
You are not all alone. But, some people, I live with one, just she is very competitive and was really upset about that. So
It wrecked my bracket. I'll tell you, I was one of those people that had him at least in the Elite Eight. I want to say I had him as a Final Four team, so I was shot from the start.
by the way, I'll never forget that game. UMBC take you down Virginia. But one of the reasons, to this day, I still follow UMBC Twitter. Because you know how creative they were.
They got famous.
It
That's
blew
right.
up.
That's I'd be more likely, like, I remember it, of course, but I think I'd be almost more likely to remember UMBC than Virginia because of how, what a great story for them. They'll be forever. That's what they'll be associated with.
All right, one other first-round matchup I find very, very interesting. It's probably not going to be a lot of fun to watch. In the West, 8-seed Syracuse, 9-seed Baylor. There probably won't be a lick of man-to-man defense played. And Baylor allows about 67 a game. Syracuse scores just over 70 a game. So that might be like watching paint dry on a wall.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, of course, during the tournament, I'm always rooting for the Big 12, even if it's Baylor. It's hard. I don't know. That might be pretty boring. Scott Drew, he's not a flashy coach by any means, so we'll see what happens that day. I don't know.
All right, let's move on to the sleepers. Cassidy, who do you have that could be a UMBC or Loyola Chicago this year?
Well, they're more well-known than that, and we touched on them a little bit earlier, but that Louisville-Minnesota matchup, I think that if Louisville is able to get past Minnesota, which, again, 7-10, it's always just kind of a coin flip there. But I think they get past Minnesota, and I've got them going past Michigan State. And it's kind of the opposite of what you were saying, Kelby, about the Wofford, Kentucky possibility. I think Louisville is going to go in there. They're going to say, who cares that we're a 7 seed? We have Louisville on the front of our jersey. And we can do anything. And I'm just not totally sold on Michigan State. I think they're great every year. They're very well coached, but I just feel like they always fall a little short in the tournament. And I think that if they're able to get past Michigan State, they could end up in a matchup with Duke in the Elite Eight. So that's my sleeper. It's a well-known team. They're just low-seeded this year as a 7 seed, but I'd say watch out for Louisville in the East.
Well, we already kind of touched on it earlier. I've kind of got a few. I've got Wofford. Yeah, they're a 7 seed in the Sweet 16. I don't have them going any further than that. But I think my big one, again, I think it's just because I'm bought in on him and I'm all about the hype of Jay Morant. But I really want to. I think it's more selfishly that I want Murray State. Again, they've got a tough division where they're going because if they do get past the 5 seed Marquette, Then they've probably got to take on the 4 seed Florida State. Florida State's hot right now. I wouldn't want to play them if I'm anybody in this tournament. So it's tough to get past them. And then if they make it past them, then they're in the Sweet 16, probably playing Gonzaga, who is more than likely a Final Four team. A lot of people would have them as their national champion. So it's a tough road for Murray State, but I want to buy in on the Jay Morant hype. I want to watch him carry this team as far as they can possibly go.
I think Murray State is a good sleeper as well. I think, in fact, they're going to beat Marquette in that 5-12 matchup. I also think they have a shot against Florida State, although I think Florida State is really underseeded. I think they should have been a number 3 seed. I think they deserved it more over Purdue or LSU. I mean, come on. You're the 4th best team in a conference that has 3 number 1 seeds
right.
in a field of 68. You're pretty darn good.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. It's going to be hard for them to beat Florida State, but if Morant gets hot, he is just good enough to take games over. And star power wins a lot of times in the NCAA tournament. The other one I kind of like as far as a sleeper is concerned is in the South. It's the 6-11 matchup, Villanova and St. Mary's. KP, you were talking earlier that by 3 o'clock, your bracket will be busted. It very well could be, because I think St. Mary's is going to beat Villanova. This is a good team. They're overshadowed in the West Coast Conference, 1, because they play late at night, 2, that's not a great league, and they're overshadowed by the dominance of Gonzaga, but they beat Gonzaga, folks need to remember, in the WCC Finals. So I think they're a dangerous club, and the other team that I like is the New Mexico State club out of the Midwest. They open against Auburn. I think they could beat Auburn. I really do think they could take down the number 5 seeded Tigers. Then, more than likely, you're going to get number 4 seed Kansas, who is nothing like the Kansas teams that Bill Self has taken to the NCAA tournament.
They're way down.
And here's the reason I like New Mexico State. New Mexico State and Michigan State begin the postseason NCAA tournament at +9 in rebound margin. That's very, very good. I don't care who you're playing against. And rebounds and guard play carries the day in March Madness. And I think they've got enough of a draw to get to maybe even the Elite 8 in the Midwest Division.
9 extra possessions in March Madness is going to go a long way, I promise.
Yes. Yeah, that is a serious factor that I think is sometimes overlooked when you're looking at the way that these teams stack up. I think defense as well is something that I'm looking at a lot more this year. If you can slow people down, obviously you're going to have a better chance at winning. That's what it's all about in March Madness, is slowing down the opponent as much as it is at beating them one-on-one.
I'm going to admit here for just a moment that, and Casady knows this because he's where I'm at during this time of the year, because of what we do for our day jobs, we don't get to watch near as much college basketball as we used to. So I don't pretend to be an expert when I'm looking at these brackets, and I really hadn't even looked at it much until we started the show. But I want your opinions on some teams that maybe were over or underseeded. I'm going to start first, okay? I think the Cincinnati Bearcats out of the AAC is underseeded. They're seeded 7th in the South. I think they're a 5, maybe a 6 seed after winning the American Athletic Conference tournament. They were very, very impressive in doing so. I just mentioned Florida State. I think they're better than Purdue or LSU as the number 3 seed. I think the Seminoles are underseeded. I think Syracuse at number 8 is too high of a seed, and I think Baylor may expose the Orange again. And then I mentioned earlier Seton Hall. I think they're underseeded at number 10. They beat Marquette, lost to Villanova, have a great schedule, a lot of quad 1 wins. Those are the guys that, just perusing over the bracket very, very quickly, I thought maybe were either over or underseeded. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say this year there's not a lot of arguments on like the 1 seeds like there normally is. I mean, that's pretty much your consensus. I thought they did actually a really good job this year. There's not a lot of complaining. But, Todd, I think the one I would point to, and again, it's just being nitpicky, is that Florida State at 4. Like he said, if you're the 4th-ranked team in the ACC this season, you have 3 people ahead of you are a 1 seed, the committee's got to have taken that into consideration and said, hey, we can't put them at a 2 or a 3. That's just too many ACC teams, so slap a 4 on them. I think unfortunately, Vermont's probably going to get the rough end of that situation because they've got to play them in the first round. But, yeah, I think I would go with Florida State as an underseeded.
If the Duke Blue Devils do not roll to the region championship game, something is wrong in Durham. I mean, that is about as easy of a march as you can get to the region championship game, where they would run into, more than likely, 2nd-seeded Michigan State. And Tom Izzo, always very, very dangerous in the postseason.
And as it should be. I mean, Duke was the best basketball team in college basketball this year, so they should have the easiest path. A rule I usually make when I'm filling out my brackets is that it's very, very hard to bet against Tom Izzo until you get to the finals. But I don't ever have him winning it all, but I always have Michigan State traveling pretty far because I'm a big believer in Tom Izzo and good coaching in the NCAA tournament.
Let's move on to our final 4 picks now. Go ahead, Casady.
My final 4. So out of the East, really controversial here. I've got Duke.
No. Who?
And they've got this guy named Zion. He's decent. Out of the West, I have Texas Tech. So 3 seed getting there out of the Western bracket. In the South, I've got Tennessee, a 2 seed. And I've got number 1, North Carolina, also making it.
I think we've got similar guys here. I've got Duke coming out of the East. Zion Williamson, by the way, for listeners of this podcast, I did for an entire episode called him Zion Williams. Nobody corrected me. In the same episode, Todd said Zion Williamson. I was listening back to it. I was like, his name's Zion Williamson. Why did I call him Zion? Entire episode call him Zion Williams. Anyway, Zion Williamson will lead Duke to the Final Four, where he will meet the Gonzaga in the West. And on the South side, I've got a little interesting one, guys. I've got Nova coming out on the South side, the 6th seed. And then the Midwest Division, North Carolina, the boys in blue, can't bet against them. But yeah, I've got a 6 seed Nova going to the Final Four. Again, a lot of that's the Jay Wright effect I was talking about earlier, how I believe in coaches in the tournament, and that's one I really believe in. So again, they don't have a lot of guys coming back from their championship team last year, but I've got them going all the way back to the Final Four.
Here's my Final 4 picks. Duke in the East, North Carolina in the Midwest, Michigan in the West, Tennessee in the South. That's 1, 1, 2, and 2. Blue Devils in North Carolina, top seeds in their regions. Michigan and Tennessee, a pair of 2 seeds. I'm going to tell you this. I almost went with what Casady did and took Texas Tech. I think Chris Beard's team is a very dangerous team to have to play.
They're good.
In fact, I'm going to go out of the branch and say this. The winner of Texas Tech and Michigan in the Sweet 16, I think will be in Minneapolis. I think the winner of that game wins the West region. I just had Michigan beating Texas Tech.
I'm so confident that I picked Nova as a 6 seed to go to the Final Four, and Todd's seller's pitch on St. Mary's might have just talked me out of picking them to win the first round. So yeah, that's how confident I am in Nova.
Okay, how about your championship picks? I'll go first. Obviously, Duke. Duke, I wouldn't pick them, but they've got one guy, and Zion Williamson is that guy that puts them above anybody else.
I for this exact same reason, I have Duke as well. I just think that Zion would not have gone to Duke if this wasn't his ultimate goal to win a championship. We've talked about it in the past. He didn't need the recognition. He could have gone to any school in America, but he chose Duke because he wanted to win a championship in college. And I think he's just going to even exceed the expectations that he's already laid out there in the regular season, and is going to dominate this tournament.
Incidentally, let me back up. Duke, North Carolina in the finals. I like Duke to beat the Tar Heels. KP?
I have got Duke, North Carolina in the finals, and Duke gets it done. They finally beat North Carolina this year. When I filled this bracket out, guys, for the first time ever, I started at the national championship, like Duke's the winner, and went backwards. I mean, there's no point. I mean, it's Zion Williamson's world. We're just living in it, and I think this tournament's going to be a blast to watch him, and it's even more fun to watch him because after the injury, you can just tell this kid just loves the game of basketball, and he's a dominant force, so it's really exciting to watch. I think I'm excited to watch him finish his career at Duke and finish out the legacy and just cement the legacy exactly where he should be, because I think anything less than a championship for Zion Williamson is a little bit of a disappointment, in his legacy.
And that's true, and that's how high his expectations really are. And also, for what it's worth, I also have North Carolina in the championship game, so I think all of us think that
which means it will not be Duke.
Right,
and North Carolina.
exactly.
Right? Yeah, we've consensus on the final, and we've got our 2 teams in the Final Four we agree on. So yeah, there's no way this is how it's going to play out.
Again, you have a chance to show that we're real idiots. You can join for free on ESPN, the first ever bracket challenge from VIBELAND Sports. Join the group VIBELAND, all capitalized, VIBELAND, and then sports with a capital S at the beginning. Free to enter. You can test your knowledge against KP, Casady, and myself. We'll be tweeting updates throughout the tournament at VIBELAND Sports on Twitter to keep you up to date on the standings. Again, it's free. Entries open now through Thursday, March the 21st at 11 a.m. Central Time.
Is that through ESPN, Todd, or
It is
Yahoo?
through ESPN,
Okay,
yeah.
just so we're clear.
And our fan poll question of the week. Who is your dark horse in this year's NCAA tournament field? You heard the three of us give you our opinions. Is it A, Murray State, B, St. Mary's, C, New Mexico State, or D, Louisville? Log on now to @VIBELAND Sports on Twitter and cast your vote on this week's VIBELAND Sports fan poll question of the week. That is our NCAA tournament preview. We'll be back to wrap up episode 13 in just a moment. As we mentioned, going to the last break, you can take part in VIBELAND Sports' first ever bracket challenge. Simply sign up through ESPN between now and Thursday, March 21st at 11 a.m. Central Time. Join the group VIBELAND, all capitalized, VIBELAND, Sports, capital S and then a little case, PORTS. It's free to enter. You can test your mettle against KP, Casady, and myself, and it should not be very difficult at all. Again, entries open until Thursday at 11 a.m. That's March the 21st. Guys, a lot of exciting things coming up on Friday. Our bonus podcast drops. It is a crossover podcast between the Bible and VIBELAND Sports. We'll talk severe weather with Channel 5 meteorologist Michael Armstrong. Coming up next week, it's our baseball preview. We'll take a look at who we think will be the best teams in baseball this year. And mark it down, coming up on Friday, February the 12th, a special bonus podcast featuring NASCAR's Kyle Petty of the infamous Petty Racing family. That's going to be a lot of fun, and that will be a bonus podcast coming up on Friday, April the 12th.
And just real quick before we get out of here, should have mentioned this earlier when we were talking about Russ and speaking out and everything. But our fan poll last week, should NBA players be fined for speaking out about officiating? 73% said no in that poll. So I think we're kind of all in agreement again that people should be able to speak out against officials, just maybe not on the court.
Yeah, I agree with that. Can we get together as fans and fine Russell for getting a 16th foul technical?
He's going to miss a game check.
Yeah,
so.
well, I don't want to fine him. I just want to collectively just Russ, we're not mad. We're just disappointed, which is worse.
By the way, I don't know if you guys saw this or not.
You're grounded.
By him being out one game this week, it's going to save the Thunder relatively $725,000.
Okay,
and
what?
most of that goes towards the salary cap.
Mm-hmm.
So they're actually going to benefit financially by him not playing against the Miami Heat.
Yep.
Interesting.
He misses the game check, and then the salary tax or the luxury tax
Drops.
saves that they save overall because of his missed game check is quite significant.
Yeah.
So think about that, though, that Russ, every game that he plays, the Thunder overall are spending about $750,000 just to watch him on the court.
Worth it.
Yes. And listen, if it was double that, I'd still say worth it.
I'll tell you what, we're getting up to KP levels when he walks through those studio doors to come in here. It costs VIBELAND Sports quite a bit to get this guy to come sit in a recliner for an hour.
I mean, it is what it is. Sorry, guys. Next question.
Yeah.
All right, that's going to wrap up episode 13. Hope you'll join us back again for the bonus podcast with KOCO Channel 5 meteorologist Michael Armstrong this Friday. Join us for episode 14. Next week, it's our Major League Baseball preview show right here on VIBELAND Sports. For KP, for Casady, I'm Todd Miller. VIBELAND Sports is a weekly presentation of VIBELAND Media.